Hello and welcome to In Our Own Voice, brought to you by NAMM Thurston Mason. I'm Tracy Meller and I'm joined by Don Crawford. NAMM, which stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is a powerful grassroots organization founded around a kitchen table in 1979 by family members of somebody struggling with schizophrenia. Now, however, mental health consumers like us can share equally in the organization's leadership. NAMM's goals are support, education, and advocacy for those with mental illness. Those goals are carried out on a national, state, and local level, but the power of the organization is in its community involvement. Our purpose in being here with you is to share our personal experiences of having a mental illness, and most importantly, how impossible it is for us to live with our diagnosis. Our presentation is divided into the following segments: dark days, where we face some of our most difficult challenges, acceptance, treatment, coping, and successes, hopes, and dreams. But first, a little about ourselves. As I mentioned, my name is Tracy. I was born and raised in Northern California, and I've been living in Western Washington since late 2008. I earned a bachelor's in psychology from the University of California at Davis and a master's in counseling from California State University in Sacramento. I've published 2 books of poetry and spent 20 years in the business world, with 15 of those in the insurance industry.
Thanks, Tracy. My name is Don Crawford, and I have a diploma in pastoral studies. I have a bachelor's degree in human resources management, and I have a counseling degree I have a master's of arts in counseling. And when I was going through my master's degree, I worked a full-time job and went through counseling my whole degree and my master's degree. And after that time, after 80 to 90 hours a week, I fell apart. I struggled for 10 years before I finally collapsed after losing 5 jobs in a row. And those were my dark days till I ended up self-committing myself into a psychiatric hospital. And there's where I began to understand what I was dealing with. I was given a diagnosis and then began to work on the progress. You know, having a mental illness is not linear. It's a process. And there's where I began to learn the process. And since that time, and I was in Providence, St. Pete's Hospital, I began to learn, listen from others, listen to those that taught me. And that was the beginning of my journey, going from dark days into understanding what was wrong with me. And I was given a diagnosis of a bipolar 1 disorder. It's a very serious disorder, and before, many doctors just gave me depressants. Well, all depressants do is make you go up. When you go up, I was already hyper, so I didn't need that. So when I finally went into the psych hospital, I began to realize, and as I talked to the doctors and the nurses there, they began to give me medication to try to make me even. And that was just the beginning of my understanding of what was going inside me. Now, that's the beginning and the ending of my dark days into when I began to move into another phase of my dealing with my mental illness. Tracy?
Yeah, I also live with bipolar 1 disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, panic disorder, and social phobia, so I've got a lot on my plate. When I talk to somebody about my bipolar disorder and they ask me what mania is like, I liken it to being on the freeway and the accelerator's stuck. And you can see it happening, but there's nothing that you can do about it. And that's a lot like what mania is like. The first time something happened to me, I was 20 years old. I had just transferred to UC Davis, And I just thought I was excited about being away from home for the first time. But then I started speaking so rapidly people couldn't understand me. I didn't need to sleep that much anymore. I just started being really belligerent. And it came to the point where people basically gave me an ultimatum. They said, either go get help at the Student Health Center or you're gone, you're out of here. And I had worked very, very hard to get into UC Davis, so I reluctantly agreed to see the psychiatrist. And I went into his office. He pulled down a book of symptoms, read them to me, said, "Are you having these, yes or no?" That was it. Diagnosed me bipolar, out the door. I had side effects from the medication. It didn't work out very well for me. I tried to communicate that to him. He didn't seem to listen, or he didn't care, I don't know which. And 3 months later, I threw my medication in the trash. I didn't think anything was wrong with me. Fast forward 6 years later, when I was 26, I began to get manic. I thought I was a prophet. I thought the last days were upon us. I saw and heard things that weren't there. I started giving my things away. I started spending money like I had it. I wandered up and down the streets of San Francisco, started scaring people in the Haight-Ashbury, so you know it had to be pretty bad. And how that came to a head was I got arrested at the airport in San Francisco for making a shrine to John Lennon, because in my head, that seemed to be the right thing to do. Now, in most psychiatric hospitals, you have 2 to a room. I was so bad, I was to my own room for 2 weeks. I was held there against my will. And I was put on so much antipsychotic medication that my eyes were rolling back in my head. I was drooling. I couldn't get out of my bed. I was a mess. And when it was over, I lost friends I thought I had. I had to file bankruptcy because I was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I almost lost my job. I lost my apartment. And I had to stay with my parents because I was so incapacitated. And the last really bad episode was when I was 33. I was going through a divorce. I lost my job. And it started with a depression that was so bad, I couldn't get out of bed. Literally, I couldn't get out of bed. I almost successfully committed suicide, checked into a hospital in California. They didn't really do me any favors. I checked in very depressed. I checked out manic. Went to Oregon where my parents were living at the time, got some more treatment, and it took a long time. They didn't think I'd come out of it, but I got some really good medical care up there and was able to recuperate, but it did take a long time.
Well, coming to acceptance that you have a mental disorder was a difficult thing for me, because I used to say, those people, that's them, and I'm me. I realized when I was in a psychiatric hospital, I began to realize I'm one of them. And begin to open my eyes and say, wow, I don't understand all this, but I need help to understand this. And when I got out of the psychiatric hospital, I wasn't given very much help. I was just given some medications, and I'd see somebody every once in a while, but I didn't get much help. And until I went to my primary caregiver and said, you know, I need some help. Something's not working here. And so I went to their behavioral health. Part of their function as a medical provider. And I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. I was confused, beleaguered. I didn't understand what was going on, but there I began to get a psychiatrist I saw every Friday, and I saw a therapist every Tuesday. That was the beginning of, wow, this is what I really have. This is why I do these different things. And through working with my psychiatrist, and I had to change medications because one made me exceptionally thirsty. I drank 10 gallons of water in one day. I had to get rid of that. I got another medication. And the problem with that one is that when they took a blood test, it was beginning to damage my liver. So I couldn't take that. And then I began to take another one, and that began to be better, but it didn't seem to be enough. And as we call it, the cocktail was somewhat effective, but it wasn't all the way effective. And I was still struggling, and one day I was so depressed, I just couldn't handle life, and I went into the psychiatric ward at Providence. They didn't have room for me. They told me I had to come back the next day. And I thought about suicide all day long. I came the next day and I was numb. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I felt lonely. I felt like, who can help me? And I went in, and the second time in the psych hospital, it was different. And that made a tremendous difference in my life and began to set me on a path of learning how to accept myself, how to accept others. And on the way, NAMM was all there for me. Every Thursday night, I met with a group of people, and that carried me. I remember screaming in my car as I was driving to the meetings on a Thursday night. And it was then I began to see other people who had the same issues I had, and I found a sense of identity.
For me, acceptance was a long time coming, both for myself and for my family. For myself, being diagnosed at 20 years old, being relatively young, you think you're invincible at that age, that nothing that bad of that magnitude could possibly happen to you. So initially I was in a lot of denial that anything was going on. And I was raised in a half-British, ex-military household, which was very stiff upper lip, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, get a grip of yourself. That was kind of the mentality I was raised with. So mental illness was not really something that was openly discussed in my family. And I think to bolster acceptance, the most important thing to do is to be what I call a patient expert. Read everything you can on your illness, ask lots of questions, and have a support network in place, whether that's your friends, your family, your psychiatrist, your therapist, whatever that looks like for you. And most importantly, to take charge of your illness rather than it taking charge of you.
Well, that was a challenge for me, Tracy, and coming to grips with my acceptance and finding my identity and having NAMM there for me, and then getting the right psychiatrist, somebody who understood me when I began to talk to them and understand who I am and understand why am I walking on this path. And I began to find acceptance. I began to find friendship. And that began a process of helping me learn how to cope, learn how to understand how I can live life in a productive way. Now, I had to file for SSDI, that's Social Security Disability Insurance, because I really couldn't work. And for 2 years, I waited on that to happen, but at the end of that 2 years, I was awarded a disability award. And then it began to come, and financially that began to help my wife and I. My wife and I had gone through the family to family training, and she understood, and she was there with me. And she was a bulwark for me, and that I appreciated. If I didn't have my wife and her strength to me, I don't think I'd be here today. And I thank the good Lord that He's provided good friends, good people, to help me understand how to cope and how to grow. Now I'm in a group with older adults that have mental illness. And I am learning so much in that group in Providence Hospital and their outpatient group for older adults with mental illness. They call it the GYM group. And I've been attending that for about 6 months, have a psychiatrist in Providence Hospital, and I'm learning coping skills about structure, about understanding when I have panic attacks, what to do and to short circuit that process and be able to maintain a good level of sanity and be able to feel comfortable in my own skin, so to speak.
It's important to remember that with respect to mental illness, they are biological brain disorders that are treatable, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What might work for Dawn might not work for me or for the next person, etc. And a lot of times you have to work with your doctor to fine-tune medication to get the right balance for you, to possibly lessen side effects. It's kind of like tuning a radio in, like it's fuzzy over here,
Yes.
Tune it, got the station.
Yes.
A lot of times it involves blood tests to monitor how that medication is doing in your body, how it's, like Don was saying, medication was beginning to damage his liver. It's really important to track that through lab work. And a lot of times you have to try a lot of different kinds of doses and medications till you get it right. You know, I wish it was so simple as you could just go out of the gate, try one medication and it would work, but sometimes it's not that easy. And as I kind of stressed before, it's important to be an active participant in your treatment, ask lots of questions, be informed about all aspects of your care. I think a lot of people's misconception is the doctor is way up here and I'm down here and I can't possibly know anything. And that's not true. When I go to my psychiatrist, I try to be a co-pilot with him in my care and my treatment. And in addition to the psychiatrist, you may want to find a therapist as part of your support system. And also, as Don sort of touched on before, recovery is not linear. If treatment plans aren't followed, it can lead to relapse. And that's something that certainly happened to me, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Thanks, Tracy. You know what? I can only imagine her having this at 20. Happened to her. I was 56. So I was getting into, starting in my older years, and it was quite an awakening for me. And I cried for help, and I got help. And I began to find that dialogue. And through having a therapist to talk to you about that and a psychiatrist. But you have to come to points where you have to cope. You have to take control. And as my cohort here has said, you gotta be your own advocate. You have to be your own advocate. And you have to be in the here and now. You can't live in the past. You have to live now and be your own advocate. I studied on the internet. I studied everything about my disorder, everything that you need to do, everything that's happening. I studied everything about the brain and the brain chemistry and found out that my problem was chemical neurotransmitters. There's electrical and chemical transmitters. I studied that in depth so that I knew what was really happening and what was going on in this brain of mine that had short-circuited, and I didn't have enough of some things and too much of others, and that as my medication came together with therapy, then I began to understand how I was balanced out. And now I'm probably the most balanced I've been, I think, since I've been 5 years old. And understanding that, and it's given me a great peace and a great confidence. And that's been what coping skills has been for me.
And with me, again, I can only kind of echo Don here. Establishing and sticking to a routine is so important. Having structure, going to bed at roughly the same time every night, getting up, that's very important. Taking my medications on a regular basis, trying to eat healthy and exercise when I can, having a support group. I'm in a local community mental health group here, and I go to support groups there and get treatment there. and also talking to friends and family on a regular basis, and especially having people that are going to be there for you, that aren't going to judge you, that will accept you unconditionally. I also try to make time for hobbies and things that I enjoy doing, such as reading, writing, and singing. And I really try to be aware of my stressors. What's going to bump me into being too high, too low? When do I need to call my doctor or my therapist? That's really important to try and stay on top of what's going on with you.
Well, I've launched out into something that I've had a desire for years, and I'm not trying to give a plug for Toastmasters as an advertisement, but it's something where I have a release that I can begin to open my heart and to begin to share, and it's opened up a new opportunity for me to see life and experience life, and to be able to share and then be evaluated and learn structure within that. And it's helped me to be somebody that I want to be a better communicator. I want to be a better leader. I want to be able to impact others in mental illness and others that don't understand mental illness to be educated. So it's bringing into me an opportunity where I can not only be an advocate for me, but I can be an advocate for NAMM and an advocate for others. And that's the goal for me. And that's the way I'm going to find fulfillment in my life. And that's what I'm doing right now. And that's why I feel that everything that I've gone through has been for a purpose and to help me to be very successful in life. And that's what I'm doing. I'm working on that. And so I want to just say it is awesome to be able to be with people, find the balance, and keep working on that balance, and then be able to share and be an advocate for others.
As far as my successes, hopes, and dreams, things that would have been unthinkable the last time I got sick, I can do now. I have my own place to live. I have my own transportation. I manage my own finances. These are big things because the last time I got sick, they didn't even know if I was going to come out of it, let alone do those things. I reclaim my social life. I have people around me who don't look at me as someone with this illness.
Right.
They look at me as a person and they accept me for that. I published my first book of poetry called Walk Backwards in Your Mind in 2007. I published the second book called More in 2009, and that was a big personal success. And I also released a demo CD of my singing in 2008 and share it on a website, and that was also a big success as well. And just NAMM is a big success. It's a lifeline. It gives me a place, where I feel that I belong. I can contribute something, I can give back, I can be that voice that wasn't there when I was sick, and that's huge for me. And I think in my final words, I would say keep in mind that recovery is different for everybody, and never to overlook success, no matter how insignificant it might seem. Never lose hope, and always dare to dream big.
Absolutely. Hope, there is hope. And take that with you. There is hope, and you need to move out of your darkness and know that there's hope. We have a 24-hour crisis line. You can call that. We have a great person that will answer your call. He has talked to many people. His name is Hank, and he will be there for you 24 hours a day. He'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and talk to people and bring hope to them. And that's a great asset to what NAMM has to offer, just that one thing. Plus the different gatherings of groups. They have a group where you can come in as a support group, and it's not a therapy group, and you can encourage one another. And they do, and then of course, if you're on the hospital side or the therapist side, you can have therapist groups. There's hope, and you can grow, and you can not be somebody who's defeated by your mental illness, but you can be one that can be an advocate and be successful and not taken down by your mental illness, but grow grow and find that life is beautiful and life is great to live by. And I just want to encourage everyone, if you're in the audience, there's hope for you. There's life for you. Make that first step. And when you do that, that's the beginning of your future and your acceptance, your coping, your successes, and what you're going to do in your life. Make that first step today. That's what I ask you to do. If you do that, you'll find that you'll grow and you'll change and you'll find and experience what we have experienced.
And like Don said, there are a lot of good programs at NAMM Thurston Mason here. There's Family to Family, he mentioned, which is for families dealing with loved ones who have mental illness. There's Peer to Peer, where mental health consumers can come in and work with other people who have been through the same thing. There's support groups. There's all kinds of good things going on. So if you need support or you want more information about NAMM Thurston Mason, please give us a call. The number is 360-493-6021. He also mentioned the emergency hotline. That number is 360-866-0403. You can visit us on the web at www.nammitm.org, or you can email us at nammitm@live.com. And in our own voice presentations, we go out into the community free of charge to any group that requests it. To request one, just give the office a call and they can send word our way that you need that.
Yes.
Or give us an email, whatever works for you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.